Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Jets FM on the OFN, special edition as the Jets take on the Atlanta Falcons overseas. We felt this was the perfect opportunity to bring back Kevin Knight from the Falcoholic, who we haven't spoken to since prior to the season beginning. We'll get him on again for sure sometime on our regular OFN broadcast. But before that, this is the good time to talk some Atlanta Falcons football with the New York Jet matchup in London. So, Kevin, how's everything? You're not in London.
No, not in London, unfortunately. That would be great. No travel budget for London, certainly. So, but we'll enjoy it here in the States.
Yeah. So this is a Falcons home game. Technically, I'm not sure exactly. I guess what are the owners? They get like an extra bit of compensation, or do they get the ticket sales in London? Is that how it works?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I think they theme the stadium after the home team and all this crap. But I mean, the Falcons got absolutely hosed by the schedule makers this year. They, for starters, with the 17-game season, teams are going to naturally have one more home or away game. So the Falcons already were having 8 home games versus 9 away games, and now they have to play a home game in London. So they will have 7 really home games only. Wow. And 10 away games, or 9 away games and 1 neutral game, I guess you could say. So the Falcons got absolutely hosed, but I mean, is that going to make a difference for their season? Probably not.
Yes, it wouldn't happen to the Patriots. So,
yep, exactly.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? Okay, so let's talk about the season for Atlanta and what the Jet fans need to know about what the Falcons. I know. Look, I've watched a lot of Falcons football because I watch a lot of the games on Game Pass, so I watch just about every game and try to watch as many plays as I can. The one thing I noticed from Atlanta, well, first of all, there's a huge difference in the passing game. Even though Ridley's there, there's that big presence is no longer there. The Julio Jones presence. You could just tell it's an issue in the passing game. There's not that big-bodied guy. And Pitts seemed to get off to a little slow start. Maybe things are, starting to come together a little bit more, which is typical for a rookie. But Matt Ryan is also at a point in his career where he's, he's not nimble of foot, and he doesn't have the Julio Jones, I'm just going to chuck it up and let him catch the ball kind of deal to go through. So it's been a little bit difficult in the passing game, but they seem to have been a little bit better over the last few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it started out really rough, which, a lot of that had to do with the offensive line. They were starting Matt Hennessy at center, who's a second-year guy, only had 2 starts last year. And then they were starting Jalen Mayfield, who was a right tackle in college, projected better to guard, and he was supposed to play guard in camp, but McGarry got hurt, Matt Gono got hurt, so they ended up having to play Mayfield at tackle during the preseason and then move him back to guard before the season started, where he not only never played guard before, but played on the right side exclusively. So
and it's showing.
Obviously that was bad. Mayfield actually had a really good week 3 against the Giants. I believe he was like the 9th rated guard according to PFF. Kind of came back to earth a little bit this week, but that's not as big of an issue as it was the first 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks, it was kind of a disaster. Against Washington, one of the best defensive lines in the league, they were okay. So I don't think the offensive line is the problem anymore. It certainly was to start things off, but now it's sort of, in week 4, we saw the offense start to actually look functional. And it shouldn't take 4 weeks into the NFL season to see that, but that's where we were. New scheme. They lost Russell Gage, the wide receiver 2, after week 2, so they've been kind of scrambling at wide receiver.
That's a big loss.
Ridley's having some uncharacteristic drops.
Yes.
He had like 3 or 4 last week alone.
I got to understand this because I was checking out the stats to go over the game, and I was looking at the stats of Pro Football Reference, and they do a tremendous job.
Yeah.
And they had those, they break down everything. And I was looking at, and I looked at, it was drop percentage. And I go, you know what? I got to look at Atlanta because I watched the Washington game.
Yeah.
And I was like, I couldn't believe how many drop passes Ridley had.
They don't count them as drops.
Yeah. And I looked at it. I was like, wait, Atlanta had 3 drops the whole season? Yeah. This isn't done right.
They're calling them pass breakups because the defender was there. And
that's
the defender definitely played a role. But
yeah. But you expect the number 1 receiver to come down with it. Yeah.
Okay. Some of those you have to come down with. So I don't think that's going to continue. That's just kind of a bad luck thing. And, I think Pitts the idea is that Pitts is going to be the featured passing game weapon, but it's not quite there yet. I know the targets haven't been there for those who've taken him in fantasy. The catches haven't quite been there except for maybe one game earlier, but he's getting more looks every week. He will be a focal point of the passing offense soon. It's just probably going to be more like, this week is a good week for it. Going forward, I think he'll be more of a part of the passing game. But outside of Ridley and Pitts, no one has really stepped up. Russell Gage, again, was supposed to be the wide receiver 2, and he's missed, all but 2 games so far. Olamide Zaccheaus is, a rotational guy, not really someone who's expected to be your number 2. And clearly they need another weapon, especially if Gage is going to miss time. And, they brought in John Brown for a visit last week. They didn't sign him, which was surprising to me because I think that would have been nice to have. But, I think, honestly, this is a year that they're just going to try to get through. And I think they want to win as many games as they can, obviously. But I think this is really just a sort of a transitional year for this team, and they're going to hope to sort of stock up next year, get out of this disastrous cap situation that they were left by the previous GM, and we'll see where it goes. But they're getting better every week, which is encouraging because the beginning of the season was just a disaster. But I think the offense in particular is finally starting to actually come together a little bit here. So.
Yeah, because if you really break it down, they probably I would guess that they had to feel good about the way that they competed against Tampa Bay. Mm-hmm. Then they had that comeback win against the Giants. Then they were in a spot perfectly set up for like 3 pretty good weeks in a row, and they couldn't hold the lead late against Washington. And when it happens, then all of a sudden all the bad stuff comes back again. And it's like, well, we're not really where we need to be. So they went from feeling good about 2-2 and, hey, we got something going here to it's a long road. We're still making way too many mistakes.
Yeah, it's just, I think it was a lot of bad luck, and there was a lot of mistakes. Like I said, if Ridley catches one of those 4 passes that seemed to be broken up / dropped, it's a different ball game. There was, the officiating was bad all around. There was that kind of bogus roughing call on Chase Young that gave the Falcons a touchdown drive. And then there was an equally bogus defensive pass interference. I believe it was on Ridley that they threw the flag and then picked it up. And it was like just one of the most obvious calls you've ever seen. And they actually picked up the flag, which, it happens like you miss a call or you don't see it, but to actually see it and throw it and then pick it up, that was bizarre to me. Yeah. So obviously sloppy on that account. They gave up a kick return touchdown, which is the only one in the NFL this year. And I think the kicker, the punter actually hurt himself on that kick. Maybe that contributed in some way to that, but,
and he's out.
It was just a slot. Yeah, he's out at least for some time. They brought in Dustin.
So the Jets and the Falcons have backup punters.
Yeah. Well, they had Younghoe Koo punting at the end of last week's game.
Oh, yeah, that's worse.
Which is not great. So they have an actual punter now. It was just a bad game all around. And Arthur Smith made the cardinal sin of playing to protect a 2-point lead, which you should consider a 2-point lead as a tie in the NFL. Teams have shown they can get down into field goal range in seconds. Washington did. And then at the end of the game, the Falcons had 30 seconds and, they got into field goal range. They needed a touchdown to win, obviously, so it didn't help. But you can't play to protect a 2-point lead.
Well, the other thing that I don't like, and I know this, everybody's got a different opinion on it, and I haven't mathematically looked at what the book says. I'm sure the book said go for it, but I don't like it when the other team misses extra points, and then the team that's the beneficiary of that feels when they score a touchdown they should be going for 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one call, it was a sort of middle ground call because I think you could make an argument for going for 2 and for just kicking the extra point. I don't think there was a clear advantage one way or the other. I mean, obviously with hindsight, you're like, oh, if you just got the extra point, a field goal would have tied at the end and taken it to overtime. So then you're like, oh, well, that was the right call. But at the same time, if you get that 2-point conversion, a field goal at the end of the game wins the game instead of taking it to overtime. So, I didn't have as much of a problem with that. I had a much bigger problem with like the last drive. They ran the ball on first down and lost yardage. Obviously not ideal. Then they ran the ball again on 2nd and 13. And that to me is a cardinal sin. They didn't have a punter Like they had no punter, and you're running the ball on 2nd and 13 in your own territory when a first down is going to basically, if not end the game, take it under a minute.
Too conservative. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like even if you have a punter, I still think it's a bad decision. But without a punter, it's inexplicable, and I think that's just a rookie head coaching mistake that Arthur Smith is going to have to get ironed out. But he doesn't have Derrick Henry back there.
No, he doesn't.
He does have Cordarrelle Patterson, but he didn't use him at all in the fourth quarter. Not one play. So
how did that? What?
Yeah.
What do you mean
use?
You mean target him?
Cordarrelle Patterson was not used as a runner or a receiver on the final 2 Falcons offensive drives. No, he was not
out there.
Yeah, it was very bizarre. It was like they thought they had a 20-point lead and just needed to rest him. It's
no explanation afterwards. Nobody asked him.
They said it was about ball security.
Why does
Cordarrelle Patterson has fumbled 9 times in his entire career on like 1,000 touches? I don't think ball security is a big deal. So, yeah, it's not. I don't buy. I think it's probably just a blunder. And it's again rookie head coach making rookie head coach mistakes.
Who's bound to
happen.
Plays?
Arthur Smith is calling the plays. And if you ask people after the first 2 games, they would have said, "Oh, he's a disaster." If you asked them after this game, they're like, "Okay, he's fine."
Notably, overreaction is ridiculous in the league.
Notably, Arthur Smith, even with like this poor scoring offense over 4 games, I believe still has a better red zone percentage than any Dirk Cutter offense in his entire tenure with Atlanta over 4 games.
That's right. That's the way you look at it. Absolutely.
That's what we brought him in for. He's delivering the red zone offense at least.
That's it. Okay, so the running game, there is none at this point. You guys are averaging 3.7 overall. Davis is only averaging 3.1. That can't continue because no one expected Cordarrelle Patterson to have this type of impact. Even before Sunday's game, he was clearly the number 2 guy on the team to Ridley offensively, and then he has the great game on Sunday. So what is this? What does that mean? Why is it the offensive line the reason why they haven't been able to get enough of a running game going?
It's really odd, and it's hard to say, but the only runner that's really having a hard time generating yardage is Mike Davis. Okay. Cordarrelle Patterson's averaging 4.4 yards per carry on 27 attempts. I don't know. I mean, it can't all be bad luck at this point. I don't really get why Davis is having such a hard time, but I think it's pretty clear that Patterson, is the guy that's having more success. And then Wayne Gallman only had 6 carries so far, all in this last game, but he averaged 4.8 on those touches. So I don't know if it's sort of just bad meshing of skill sets. You know how it is. Sometimes you get into the season.
What kind of line blocking scheme do they run?
It's zone for the most part. I mean, they run some. Obviously, they mix in some power stuff too, but it's pretty much zone. And Mike Davis has had success in that system before, so it's not like it doesn't match his skill set. But I don't get it. But I think Patterson kind of needs to be the primary guy. And I don't know. I don't think that means he needs to take 20 carries a game or anything, but I think it maybe needs to be closer to an even split as opposed to 2-1 in favor of Mike Davis at this point. And I like Davis, and it's just
or at least let Gallman in one game switch roles with Davis to find out, is it a Davis problem or not? That would be a wise thing to do, because because you could tell, maybe it's just those plays we call for Davis that we call differently for Patterson that just isn't working. So but maybe that's something that we'll find out soon enough. But overall, what's like the percentage of? I mean, how often is Matt throwing the ball a game? Is he throwing the ball a lot less than he used to? Because as we talked a lot about, there was a lack of running completely with the former regime. So are they still at least trying to run the football?
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say there's a healthy number. It's a healthier balance than it's been in years past, but it's still very much, I think, skewed in favor of
still too much passing.
I mean, I think it's probably 70-30 right now, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And I think it's unfortunate, but Davis's production is sort of dragging down the whole running game. I mean, against Washington, he averaged 1.1 yards a carry. So he had 14 yards on 13 carries, whereas Patterson was averaging 5.7 on 6 carries, and Dahlman was 4.8. So it's just like the running game isn't as bad as it appears on paper. We either need to figure out how to make Davis productive, or we need to sort of, limit him to a passing down.
And he had a good touchdown.
Still had some success. Yeah, I mean, he's still
was that
a good
run
player.
Or a pass?
That was a pass.
Okay.
He's been able to turn some of those dump offs into positive gains and turn that one into a touchdown. But the problem is Cordarrelle Patterson is even more productive than Davis. And Davis, it's not like Davis has been doing a bad job as a receiver, but Patterson's taking these dump offs and turning them into touchdowns at an absurd rate. So
keep this in mind. The Jets got burned all day against Tennessee with McNichols with the dump offs.
Yeah.
So you would have to believe. First of all, Atlanta is going right in that direction. Secondly, the Jets have to know this and have got to figure out a way to stop it.
Yeah. I mean, if you had told me through 4 weeks that Cordarrelle Patterson would be the number one weapon on the Falcons, I would have said you're high, but that's where we are. I mean, he's been that dominant. I don't know why it took teams 10 years to figure out how to use Cordarrelle Patterson as an offensive player, but Arthur Smith seems to have figured it out. So
good for them. Good for him. These two teams haven't met, by the way, since 2017. The leading rusher in the game was Tevin Coleman, who is now with the Jets. He hasn't done much with the Jets. He hasn't really done much for the past year and a half. I don't know if the injury's been an issue. He said it was not when he spoke last year or so, but who knows? I think the Jets are trying to give, Carter a little bit. The Jets are pretty much in a situation where they are throwing out as many young guys as possible, and they are just going to live with it. They're just going to live with the mistakes. They're going to live with the growing pains. And that's how they're going to play and coach. And sometimes you're going to get the great plays that Zach had last week. And then a lot of times you're going to get a lot of the bad plays from Zach that we saw the previous 2 weeks when he was throwing the ball away, especially against New England. So that's a lot different than, you've got a rookie quarterback and you've got a veteran. You got like one of the veteran productive quarterbacks in the NFL on one side against a rookie on the other. It's going to be an interesting, contrast.
Yeah. And it is going to be interesting. And I think, the Falcons are getting their offense to the place where it's not a liability anymore. I mean, it was absolutely a liability over the first 3 weeks. But I think now they're to the point where they're able to uncork more of the playbook. We saw some deep stuff for the first time all season last week. So I think this is an offense that's going to, continue to get better in terms of Atlanta. With the Jets, we'll have to see. The Falcons defense has been very much a boom or bust unit. They're not as bad as they appear on paper. Their points scored, obviously they're the worst scoring defense in the league, but of their, 128 points, I would say 28 of them are pick sixes in that kick return. Sure. So if you take them down to 100 points, instead they're more like, instead of the 31st defense, they're more like the 22nd, which I think is right about where they are. I think they're below average, but not that bad. So again, I think against teams where they can blitz effectively, they will actually look pretty good. And I think the Jets are one of those teams. Because Dean Pease is a really, really smart and effective blitzer. But against teams with great offensive lines like Washington, Tampa Bay, they were not able to generate any pressure at all. And that obviously was a big problem. But against a team like the Jets that's given up a lot of pressure and with a young quarterback, I think they're going to have more success in that department.
Well, considering they only have 7 sacks, who then has been the player or the players that have put enough pressure without without the statistics, without the sacks?
I mean, Dante Fowler's actually been decent. But the problem is he's the only edge defender that's been able to put any sort of consistent pressure out there. The rest of it's been Grady Jarrett. And Marlon Davidson was having a good season. He's been injured the last week, probably going to miss this game too. Okay. But it's Grady Jarrett and Dante Fowler and blitzing. And that's pretty much, it. I think Deion Jones has been maybe their best pass rusher overall in terms of his PFF grade. He's been a demon as a blitzer. He's just so fast. But if this team can't blitz effectively, the pass rush is not good. If they can blitz, the pass rush will look okay. But it just depends on the matchup. Tom Brady's going to carve up the blitz. Washington had a great offensive line. Blitz didn't work. Jets don't have a great offensive line or a quarterback capable of dissecting the blitz. So Jets probably going to struggle against this defense more than a team like, Washington would have.
And you would think Pease would definitely be using that game film, the Patriot game film.
Yeah.
From his old Patriot days.
He runs a very similar system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like out of the DBs, the player that seems to be having a solid season, and I'm not talking about, some of the named cornerbacks, Terrell, we know he's the number one guy, but Eric Harris at safety seems to be having a good start. But on the flip side, Fabian Moreau seems to be struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought Moreau would kind of be a nice surprise, and he's been more bad than good thus far. So, he really needs to get it together because they lost Isaiah Oliver, who I would say was actually playing the best out of any of their secondary players over the first 4 games before he got hurt.
He got hurt in the Washington game.
Yeah, he did. And he was having a great season after his move to the slot. It just seemed like it was a great fit for him, and he was just a tremendous run defender there too. Just made a bunch of clutch tackles to prevent some third downs. But Terrell is good. Obviously, Eric Harris, I think, did have a nice game, even though he dropped a couple picks last week and gave up that 1 touchdown in cover 2, which that should never happen. But,
yes, I saw that one too. Yeah. The Falcons, like the Jets, have not picked off a pass yet. Yes. The only 2 teams in the NFL without an interception.
Yes. So Eric Harris had at least 2 go through his hands last week. They've been in position to get these. That's why turnovers are such a weird stat. Because they're random. Even and look, the old adage, like if you could catch, you'd be playing offense.
Sure.
Does ring true for the most part.
True.
But it's so the turnovers will come for them, I think, in time. But overall, this is a unit that just needs to get their hands on some.
Who takes over for Oliver?
It looks like it's unclear at this point, but it'll probably the guy who took over from was the rookie Avery Williams, who's also the punt returner. He's very
Boise
small.
State, yeah.
Yes, but he's very aggressive, and he doesn't back. He's not phased at all, and I think that's why he's playing over guys like Darren Hall and some of these other players. That Avery Williams is just kind of a balls to the wall kind of guy, and I think they're like, well, if he's going to be a rookie and make mistakes, at least he's going to go out there and make them at 100 miles an hour. So he's been okay, but I mean, as like a rookie, 5th, 6th rounder, expectations should be low. But yeah, I mean, I think they're probably going to elevate someone. It looks like maybe Kendall Sheffield will come off IR this week, perhaps. So we'll see how that goes. But it's really going to be, I mean, most of the emphasis is, Moreau just has to get better. He's got to be better across from Terrell. And Terrell, I think has played about as well as you could hope with very little help around him.
Will Terrell, as far as the way they play their defense, will Terrell mirror Davis, or does he play aside?
It's been a little of both. So it just depends on what Dean Pease wants, but he he's made it clear that they'll do what they'll change the game plan depending on if they think there's a guy that they need to have him shadow. But I would say that they've played more sides than they have shadowing, particularly with the injuries. I think when they had Oliver in there, they probably would have been more likely to move Terrell around. But now that they're working in a different player in that group, probably going to play sides this game. But we'll see.
And we'll keep an eye, too. You just mentioned with Avery Williams as a rookie in the slot. Jamison Crowder just came back last week, had a touchdown. He was a big help. So that I would guess that's going to be a matchup the Jets would then try to exploit.
Yeah.
Crowder, one of the better, of course, we're not talking about. It's interesting how sometimes, the last couple of years, NFL teams have moved some of their top receivers into the slot, but a true slot, smaller receiver like Crowder has been one of the best in the league for a few years in that type of role for that type of fit.
Yeah.
So we'll find out if they can take advantage of that or not. Are there players up front that have been the most disappointing that if you're the Jets, you want to try to take advantage of?
I mean, the run defense hasn't been great. I would say they haven't been bad either, but I think up front, Grady Jarrett's obviously great, but when he's not in there, particularly with Marlon Davidson out, they don't really have the horses there to do much on the interior. Tyler Davison at nose tackle has been pretty mediocre. They're definitely going to try to bulk up there and probably get a true 3-4 nose next year. Jordan Davis hive is definitely in effect for Atlanta for their top draft pick. But the other edge spot that's not played by Dante Fowler, I mean, the rookie Ogundiji has been like a solid guy. That he's getting more snaps, but Steven Means not good. Jacob Twitty Mariner was actually made a game day inactive last week. They just don't have anyone opposite Fowler, and we all knew this was the case going into the season. They just didn't do anything about it. So,
well, and we also talked about the fact that Pease will run a 3-4, and the Falcons defense wasn't prepared for that personnel wise. So, what do you see there? Like, are you seeing players play maybe out of position? Are there roles, or are they playing more of a defense that Pease will play now? He'll let guys play in certain spots because that's where they're more familiar with, and then until they get the players that they want to play, that'll be best for his system. They'll just have to deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a hybrid system, and Pease said as much. They do play some 3-4 looks usually on early downs, but it's more 4-3 on late downs. But they're getting Michael Walker some run as sort of like a stand-up rusher, and he's been pretty good in that limited role. They may start using Brandon Copeland more in that role. He's been more of an inside backer so far, but we'll see. It's just not a good front seven. Or no. Well, the linebackers are fine, but the front, other than Grady Jarrett and somehow Dante Fowler actually playing decently well, they just don't have any other players. I think Ogundiji is maybe a guy you'd want to be like your third or fourth edge. But he's basically being asked to be the number 2 because everybody else is a disaster. So they just don't have the edge pressure to really be a good pass rush. They can be functional with the blitzing. Both Oluokun and Deion Jones have been excellent blitzers. Even a lot of the secondary players have too. But it's just the actual edge pressure is very lacking.
Okay, and of course on special teams, we know how dangerous Patterson can be in the kick return game as a kick returner. But as you also mentioned, the new punter, so that could come into play. We know the kicking situation, the place kicking situation has been excellent, almost perfect for the past year and 4 games. What about, you mentioned the offensive line? Mayfield is obviously the one guy, being a rookie, playing at a position that teams will want to exploit. Lindstrom looks like he's having another solid season at the other guard spot. Matthews is always going to be solid at one tackle spot. But what about McGarry? And Hennessy is also maybe not where the Falcons would like him to be just yet, but he's only made 6 starts in his career so far. But what about McGarry? He was somebody that was, a lot of people was targeting, the Falcons need a right tackle. They need a right tackle, but they're giving McGarry a shot. So how's that working out?
Yeah, I think McGarry is maybe the biggest concern on the offensive line, not for his necessarily play, compared to everyone else, but more like based on what the expectations were. I think everyone expected Jalen Mayfield to struggle. He's a, rookie getting thrown in at a different position and a different side of the line than he's ever played. So it was expected that he would struggle. Hennessy, I think, has been mostly fine. But McGarry has been below average consistently now. And as a third-year player with a first-round pedigree, that's just not good enough. So I think when Matt Gono comes back, there will be a possibility that Gono will get a shot at right tackle. But yeah, I think that McGarry has been pretty mediocre this year. So that's definitely something you could exploit. In terms of the rest of the guys, Chris Lindstrom has been a top 5 guard this year. So that has been really nice to see him continue to grow. Obviously, Jake Matthews, elite pass blocker. The run blocking hasn't quite been there for him this year. That's why his overall PFF grade is kind of mediocre, but he's still a top 10 pass blocking left tackle, which is what's more important for the Falcons at this point. But, I think Mayfield is mostly okay now. He's not the liability that he was in week 1, just getting trucked by every single person that lined up across from him. Surviving Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne and Vita Vea and all those guys, I think he's got it under control. He's not necessarily a plus pass blocker. I think he's still got some weaknesses there. But as a run blocker, he's actually been pretty good. So that's nice to see. And then, again, Hennessy, I think he's maybe like the 14th or 15th center, according to PFF. So about league average. I think that's fine for a second-year, third-round pick. I think they're expecting him to continue to grow too. But they've struggled more with, I think, the communication stuff. Again, with the right tackle injuries they had in camp, they didn't get a chance to play this starting five until basically week 1. So the communication has been a little lacking. The pickups on blitzes and stunts have been kind of their big weakness. So, that is where they've been vulnerable. I think in pure pass block situations, they've been fine, but picking up stunts and blitzes has been their weakness.
All right. Now, you mentioned a few injuries already. Any other players not going to play for Atlanta that would be considered a key part of the team?
It's up in the air if Gage Marlon Davidson will play. We're still waiting for more information on Eric Harris. He didn't practice today, Wednesday, but
really? Okay.
Yeah, we don't. He finished the game against Washington, so I guess we're not really sure how serious that is, or if it's more of a rest and rehab thing. But
so Gage could return.
Gage could return. They didn't put him on IR, and this would be, the third week since his injury. So this is the timeline they were probably hoping to get him back. We'll see if that ends up turning out or not. But I mean, the big loss is Isaiah Oliver, who was, I think, having the best year of any of their secondary players. And how does Avery Williams sort of step into that role?
And any particular reason why they haven't used Hayden Hurst more in the passing game?
I think the passing game had training wheels on, honestly, for the first 3 weeks. I think this 4th week was the first time the passing game has had access to a larger playbook, more intermediate and deep stuff. And some of that has been the offensive line struggles early. Some of that has been I don't think the offense was installed, until the last week, basically. So it's hard to say. I think that they need to use Hurst more, obviously. I think they want to, because I think that they would like a team to sign him away and get them a comp pick next year. So they need to illustrate that he's worth something out there. But I think going forward, particularly with the wide receiver group as weak as it is, the 12 personnel is going to be their bread and butter. And I think they're going to get to more of that. But I don't know what the problem has been thus far. I think it's just been kind of a sloppy start on offense.
Okay. And by the way, who's the top reserve off the bench on the offensive line right now?
On the interior, it'll be Drew Dahlman, the 4th round pick. Okay. He had to fill in a little bit, I think, in week 2. Actually did okay in about the 10 or 12 snaps that he came in for. He can play center and guard. And then at tackle, it's Jason Spriggs, I guess, is the swing guy. Okay. So, a guy is not a plus starter by any means, probably more of a below average starter, but both of those guys I think are solid, and if they had to come in, it wouldn't be a disastrous drop off. But hopefully we don't have to find out.
All right. And who's the other reserve? Is that Gossett? What's his name? Is it Colby Gossett?
I think it'd probably be, I guess, Dahlman for the interior spots and Spriggs for the exterior ones. I don't know if they're going to activate an 8th guy for game day or not. They may. Oh, okay. It probably would be Gossett, but I don't know exactly, because Gono's still on the PUP. So
okay. All right, sounds good. I appreciate it. What do you think? You have a prediction for the game?
I mean, I think the Falcons win, but I don't think it's gonna be pretty. I think the Jets showed that they are also a team that's improving. They took it to the Titans, and look, the Titans were missing their 2 big offensive receivers. Sure. They're 2 horses basically. So it was kind of on Derrick Henry to win the game, and he almost did, but. It's I don't think the Jets are a pushover, and the Falcons certainly haven't demonstrated that they're not a pushover either. So, I do think it'll be a good game. These London games are always wacky too. So, we'll see. I think the Falcons are probably the team that comes away with the win, because I think the defense actually matches up well, in terms of if they can pressure you with the blitz, the defense will actually look good. If they can't, the defense is going to look really bad. So, I think the Jets are a team that's vulnerable to that sort of pressure, at least at this point, with all these offensive line injuries and the rookie quarterback. But, I do like what I've seen from Zach Wilson over the past week. I think he's going places, but I don't know if he'll get there.
It'll take a while.
Yeah.
And by the way, the Falcons lead the NFL in penalty yards.
Yeah, that's not great. Also not great. So,
all right. You've got your own show, of course. Now you have a YouTube show as well. So how often do you do that every day?
Yeah, the YouTube show is Falcoholic Live. That is Wednesdays at 8:10 p.m. Eastern, and then we also do post-game shows after the games. So whenever that ends up wrapping up, and then there's also a Falcoholic podcast that I occasionally guest star on, and that comes out I think 2 or 3 times a week. So
All right, Kevin, I appreciate it. And your fantasy team is kicking ass. What are you doing there? Undefeated, 4-0.
Well, I'd never played Dynasty before, and people were like, you need to plan for the future. But then I was like, well, why win later when you can win now? So that was
That's right.
I
don't have a problem with that either.
Yeah, but
we'll see how it goes. I was pretty close to you this
past
past week, though.
Oh yeah, that was Mike Williams got 1 point, and so did Brian Edwards, I think.
I know
so it was a very lackluster,
terrible Monday night matchup. That was.
Yeah,
that didn't help out any. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Sounds good, Kevin. We'll have you definitely on the fantasy show sometime in the next week or two. Hopefully we'll have you on before you lose a game.
Yeah. We'll see. Is that why you keep putting it off?
Yeah, just keep waiting until, all right,
sails?
Now Kevin lost. Now we'll get him on. We don't want him. We don't want him to come on the show.
Don't want
like
me
this.
to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Kevin. Appreciate it. Talk to you next time.
Yep. All right. Thank you.